I think it was a couple of weeks before, I'd been lucky enough to come down to Melbourne and do a little bit of grafting exercise in the backyard with a bloke who gave us some really good information at the time. And I met the guy here, we were talking about grafting, he said, look, I do it in August. So I came in and had a bit of a mess about it. It was very successful, the technique he gave me was really, really good. Quentin already knew, but he holds everything to his chest. He doesn't share anything. He's the most miserable bloke in your club. Where is he? Where is he? I can't see him. Oh, there he is. Yeah. Because I'm getting all this information for the first time last year, and the guy's going, oh, you do this, do that, and then Quentin, you go back to Quentin's place, he goes, I did that graft there. You go, why did I have to go way out the other side of Melbourne to find this when I can get to your place in 4 hours? Oh, well, information's power. So he likes the throne, he does, unfortunately there's a cistern behind his throne. But anyway, so we learned a bit of stuff, and then so we got to talking about different forms of propagation, and it dawned on me that quite a few, because in the pre-demonstration period of the gathering, I got to talking to a few different people, and this person was growing a few seedlings, this person was doing a few cuttings, this person was grafting pines, and I'm going, okay, so we stand up here, we're talking about stuff, and a lot of the stuff that I was saying was like falling on ears for the first time, and it was within your club. There were people within your club that are like really very, very skilled. So I thought, well, I then talked to David after the thing. He sent me an email, and I can paraphrase, he said, thank you very much for not dropping the seed word. like I would ever say anything about cuttings on the table. But yeah, I just dropped it then. So anyway, I said, look, why not I did a talk in somewhere north of Sydney. It was a couple of years ago, and it was up Bonsai by the beach or something it was. And it was a thing on propagation, and it went over pretty well. And the Hood boys were there as well, and they're both lunatics. Is this being filmed? They're both lunatics. Great guys, but they're not wide right. So yeah, we got to talking. They were talking about propagation as well. So the things went hand in hand. It went really, really well, and I really enjoyed the talk, and I learned a lot from them. And they actually picked up a few things from me, which is unusual because most people don't. But anyway, so I said to David, look, because there are a lot of people in your club doing propagation, and it's a bit of a surprise to a lot of the people. How about you do a thing on propagation? He said, well, if you want to do a talk, we'll organise something. So that's why I'm back here. Okay, now, it's a great time of the year for propagation. It's one of the times of the year where you can actually get some big trees fairly quickly, because this is like cutting time. So if you're doing big cuttings, now years and years ago, sadly, Ted Poynton is no longer with us. He shuffled off recently within the last 12 months or so. But Ted used to take cuttings of elms of that size, and he used to strike them. Now, he had a little bit of technology in his 100-foot propagator, but he used to strike these cuttings, and he used to make some pretty interesting trees out of them. And that's what really fired me up. Ted's the one who got me involved in propagation, and blokes like Jeff Ackland, Max Lay. I knew Jeff only briefly because he was quite elderly when I met him, but Max I only knew through his book. But that inspired me, because out where I am there were no nurseries, let alone bonsai nurseries. So the only way I was ever going to get any material was to grow it myself. Because if there was a good demonstrator somewhere, by the time I got to where that place was, I would get there a couple of days, maybe at best, before the show was on or the demonstrator was working. By then, you mongrels would have all picked over the nurseries, and I would have been getting the dregs of whatever. Yeah, Dave, it would have been Dave. I would have been getting the or Quentin. Well, yeah, Dave would have been buying it on Quentin's behalf. Anyway, so I started, we had a farm, and so I was able to put things in the ground and just grow things. So I grew lots and lots of stuff. And then I did really, really badly with the stuff, and it was all poles and awful stuff. So I went through, cut things, and seen what would happen. So if I was to ever have a nursery and name it, it would be called Wait a While, because I just do stuff, and then I just see what will happen. But I do stuff in so many numbers that interesting things happen, and when stuff's boring, it doesn't matter, because the other two trays had lots more, I don't know, they were under a bench and they probably grew like that, and then so you get a little bit of interest in the material. So I started propagating, and then from that you learn bits and bits, and in the end, because I think propagation is from the Latin, it means fill your yard with rubbish and cut your clothesline down, because that's what I had to do. So I don't think you can probably look that up. Anyway, so what I want to tell you, or what I want to show you tonight is the stages of propagation that I play around with. So I used to do a lot of grafting back in the day, but it was mainly deciduous trees, maples and fruiting varieties and that there, because you'll often be driving down the highway and see things like a Granny Smith growing on the side of the road. Somebody's had a feed, thrown the thing out, it's grown, and you get these, and a lot of them are run over or slashed or whatever, and you get these, but the wood itself is terrible, like as far as a tree to grow them in any size. So I used to dig those things up and just graft crabapple into them. And if you had 20 branches, you put 20 grafts on. And you can literally trip over and graft a piece of crabapple onto an apple. The cambium layers are like that thick. You've got to be, I think Stevie Wonder did me the first lot of grafting, he showed me the first lot, and it was quite successful. So there's no excuse if you want to have a go at grafting. I can guarantee you will absolutely be successful. And I never ever say categorically, if you can't graft crabapple onto apple, you shouldn't be walking upright and your thumbs won't be opposing. Okay?
Is that what happened to you?
It is, yeah. And I can graft crabapple smart, so there you go. Anyway, so we're going to start off with seed. Now, the first thing you do with seed is you collect it, clearly. Now, the story is you collect the seed, especially of exotics. Okay? So exotics is this time of the year. So exotics, you get your seeds. Okay? So you go out here and you pick a few maple seeds. So that's this Japanese maple. You then get your nursery tray, okay? And instead of putting them in the fridge for 12 weeks like all the books say, which is just rubbish, okay? It is just rubbish. You then get the seed, you get a tray or whatever, you fill it with a good open textured soil, you sprinkle the seed on, and you generally cover it 1.5 times the diameter of the seed. So you have to get your slide rule out and get this exactly right, because this all plays a part in the success. So you just throw them on the thing, scatter a bit of mix over the top, stick it somewhere in the corner, and water it occasionally. And the next thing you know, now these are, and as somebody who actually turns this stuff out, they're probably about, I think conservatively they'd be 3 to 4 years of age. And even though they're tiny, I grew a heap of them. I was in Canberra, I was at a hospital somewhere, just visiting a person, believe it or not, I wasn't actually there. And there was an interesting ash out the front near the car park. And it was like desert ash, but it was a smooth bark one. So it was ornus or one of those, but it didn't have ornus foliage. I like ash, they grow out where I am. So I just collected a couple of handfuls of seed, and threw them in a bag. When I got home, I sowed them straight away. It was May, June. Tree was bare, the seed was still on there. So I sowed the stuff, it all came up, and I mean, yeah. Now I don't feed them. They just get whatever comes out of the water, and that holds them to that stage. Now, they're buggers to tear apart when they get like that, if you leave them a few years, but it's a good way to actually have stock sitting there. If I need to punch out 200 or 300 starters, I can do it very, very easily. So I grow 4 or 5 of these. They sit in one thing, and I do elms, and I do pine exactly the same way. Now, my point about stratification with seeds, you've got to collect the seed, you've got to put it in the crisper, you've got to do, they were in a cone a month and a half ago. They're black pine seedlings. These ones were in a cone 12 months ago, but I put them into a tray like that, and there was, and I'm not joking, there was 300 to a tray that size of these. And I broke them up, sorry, they were the year before. I broke them up last winter, spring, going into spring, would have been August. So these, and they just sat and they're done bugger all, because I don't need a whole heap of pines, because as some people can tell you, I've got a lot of pines in my yard. So I don't need to push any out in a big hurry. So these here will just get bent and all the rest of the stuff and just wide and set out, and we'll see what happens later on. But as far as in our climate, most of the information we get when it comes to propagation comes from the Northern Hemisphere, and they have proper winters. It snows, the leaves fall on the ground, it snows, the snow melts, the water actually wets everything, the seed comes up. In our climate, without bottom heat, we had 21 the other day where I am. So things germinate fairly quickly, and the problem is once they germinate they sit. But that doesn't matter because they'll hold, spring will come along, they'll fire up and they'll get away. So I don't have to worry about filling the crisper with anything other than Jim Beam cans and cold pizza, I suppose. So, the seed thing, that's not a problem we have to worry about in this country. Well, certainly in the southern parts of this country. So, you know, that's up to you. If you want to grow things from seed, most people go, oh, if you grow things from seed, it takes so long. Well, you've got to also look at the fact that a lot of the stuff that you will grow, you'll never see mature. Stuff like this is a tree from last year. It was a really, not only was it an ordinary tree, but it still is an ordinary tree, but it's a 20-odd year old ordinary tree. And when I grew this, I probably grew a couple of thousand at the time. And even though that was a long time ago, it was 20-odd years ago, in the meantime, pretty well every year I grow a few. So it can't always be just about what you want. And it's not that you're going to go out and do things commercially, but you've got other members in the club, you can grow a bit of stuff and you can hand a bit on, they can do a bit back, and you'll get, you know, you get to exchange a bit of material. So the idea of the propagation is not just for what you can use yourself. Now, with stuff like this, I can grow these as minis, and they take me probably from start to finish in 5 years. They can be quite presentable. And admittedly, at my age, 5 years is a bit of a stretch, because I'm a bit of a mess already. So I shudder to think what I'll look like in 5 years. I'll probably be the same shape as some of the trees I've got. Shit, I'm already that shape. Don't say it, David. Don't say it. So, but somebody else will take the material on. I was in a yard this afternoon, and there are a lot of representations in that yard of people that sadly are no longer with us. But we have to say thank you for the effort that they put in, because there's a lot of the stuff that I've seen today, the bloke who's got them takes credit for them, which he shouldn't, but he does. Yeah. I won't name anybody. But there is a lot of interesting material in that yard that would have started off as literally just rubbish. And then somebody grew it for a while, and it went through half a dozen hands before it ended up where all trees end up, at Quentin's. Anyway, I think I've rubbished him almost enough. Anyway, so, seed, good potting mix, always good potting mix. The best potting mix you can get your hands on. It gives it a good start. Put it in, grow it on, and then set it aside. It'll be fine. If you want to put them out first season, you can, if you've got the space. I really struggle with the space in the yard. I've got a reasonable sized yard, but it's very full. Very, very full. So a lot of this stuff doesn't get potted out until I make room from the other stuff that goes out. So at that stage. And then you think to yourself, okay, well, I want to grow a few things on from seed, or I don't. I want to do the next best thing. Well, you can often find good material on trees, like cutting material. The other reason why you grow lots of seed, this is a trident maple. I didn't grow that tree. I can prove that I didn't grow this tree because it's not in the middle of the pot. I'm one of those people, even though I'm this shape, when I pot things, they're in the middle of the pots. I've got a real problem with symmetry. Like, my son has Asperger's, and they said that's nine of the precursors give you Asperger's. I think he got 7 from me. So I've got an issue. I know I've got some issues. Thanks for not bringing that up as well. But this one here is a seedling. And it's from, hang on, sorry, I had to do this to put it in the back of the ute and bring it down today, because it would have stood up like mad, and the police absolutely love it when I go belting through with whips, belting around in the... Okay, so, from seed. So this is from seed, and it's one season. That's just a seedling that's come up in that. It's a trident maple. I've got a trident maple in my yard that many, many years ago, Grandpa used to come out and collect seed from, because it's corky bark, and the seed actually come up with an interesting bark. So, but they come up all the time in the yard. So, this one came up, but it's really, really strange. It's got a very strange shaped leaf. That's this one here. Its budding is very, very close. I think it'll make really good minis. I only have one, that's why it's unmolested, but it's reverted. There. So this is the seedling. These have all got the same characteristics. This has got a much bigger leaf. This is obviously a seed off the other one, so it's got a much bigger leaf. But if you don't want to start from seed and you want to start from something a little bit bigger, then we go from seed to cuttings. Now I know, I'm using this as an example because it was a good example. I've got to cut that hell out of it anyway, so, but I feel like saying, is it safe? Sorry, I watch a lot of those sorts of movies. So, I've still got the seedling. It's there, which they need to be divided up. So you don't want to start from seed, you want to give something a bit of a head start. Cuttings. Okay? So, with cuttings, you need to have, with stuff like this, and this is all just very simple stuff, but 45-degree angles, fairly close to a bud. Straight into, I usually put them into sea sole or Charlie Carp. Prep a heap of cuttings, so go through, you do a whole series of cuttings. There. Now that one piece, we'll just do now the notes lessons blowing out. Sorry if I got somebody.
Yeah, good.
I was aiming for Quentin, but I don't have the hand strength for that anymore. Don't say a word. I'm this close, mate.
Just throw it, Don.
Yeah. So even, and I do, there's a guy by the name of Graham Beat who lives in Bendigo, and good guy Graham. I don't like him very much because he can strike Japanese maple cuttings like they're, I don't know, like they're pieces of geranium. And I can't strike Japanese maple, but this stuff here strikes like a weed. Like trident maple strikes like a weed. Now, okay, so little pot, and when it comes to striking cuttings, with all the different types of mediums that you can use, and you get your potting mix that you're going to grow your tree in. Okay, I don't work for Debco or Tunga or any of those. They're all fabulous things, and a pot that size will take probably a dozen, 15 cuttings. So you put them all the way around. IBA, so you wet them, you soak them while you're prepping them, you then dip them, and when I dip them, I don't mess about. I buy a thing called Kendon number 3. It's an IBA, an indole butyric acid, so it's a powder. The gel is very, very good. I'm an old bloke. I started with the powders, and so I like all. I could do a drug joke there, but well, I won't.
Leave it.
Leave it. Well done. Yeah, no, so I don't mess about with the IBA. It goes on, and I'll coat it to about there. I usually just put it in, straight in, and then make a hole with your dibble stick, and straight in. They'll be struck by at least mid-spring. Now I did some because I knew we talked about this fairly early. Trident maple from cutting, one season. Now it's rubbish, I know it's rubbish, but that's Parodia persica, it's not mine. I wish it was, it may be, it depends on how fast I am at the end of the evening. I've got a lot of parodias, I absolutely love parodias. But that will be, I don't know the exact lineage of it, but that will probably, at some stage, one of its parents would have come out of Ted Poynton's place. Because he was really, if that's the red edge form, is it?
Come out of your place, Don.
This one did. I wonder what was beautiful. Sorry, you'll have to excuse me. I am actually getting a bit warm. So, if that came from my place, then that would have been a cutting, because I only had 32 cuttings from Ted, it would have been that. It would have sat in the ground for 2 to 3 seasons. It would have been dug up as a lump and sold on, because I sold quite a few into Melbourne, that's where I got them from. And then it's been handled quite nicely. Now the gentleman that owns it now is rubbish. But the bloke who had it before him, fabulous. Okay, so yeah, I didn't see it anyway. Okay, now that's probably an old tree, but that's been a nice tree for a long time. So, you know, like anything else, so cuttings. So yeah, it's important to do the cutting aspect of things because it can actually get you lots and lots. It can save single species. This is one tree. It's not named. I don't think it'll ever be a named variety, but it's a sport that came, or it's a mutation that came up because the tree that it came from, it doesn't have anywhere near these sorts of characteristics. The leaf shape is completely different. The density is unbelievable. It's just, yeah, except for up here, then it just blows out when it goes up there. So I bought this for a couple of reasons. It gave me a way to illustrate cuttings, which is, I didn't bring any potting mix. I've got to get in the car and travel 450 k's tomorrow. So me doing cuttings and having it in the back of the car, they're not going to strike. So I don't want to tell you that these here, they all grow on to be whatever, but it's just a rubbish piece of stuff off that. But if you want to grow a forest, there's a forest. You strike them. If you get an 80% strike rate, and you will with that sort of stuff, and you want the group to trigger at the same time, I want the colour to be the same, because the amount of times people grow seedlings and they put them in the forest and they look fabulous, and I love those aerial shots of Canada in the autumn where there's yellows and oranges and reds and whatever. But if you're going to do that in bonsai, we're a bit anal about that sort of stuff, you know. So you want them all to trigger at about the same time, and you want them to look about the same foliage, all that sort of stuff. So cuttings are the way to do that. In fact, they're the only way to do that if you're going to really be serious about it. So you've got that. When it comes to single species or single varieties, where you know you can't just go down the street and get 10 of this or 10 of that, or if they're not stable, and this is unstable because it's already done this, but I want to persevere with it, I want to actually turn it into something. So what I'll do is I'll try cuttings on this. I don't know if there is, they should be fairly good because the internode space is ridiculous. So getting enough internodes in the ground, which is points where there are certain enzymes or whatever in the material where they will sort of allocate roots. So it should be okay by cutting. It'll only ever be, I would imagine, it's about 5 years old, so it's not a massively big tree for that age. The trunk's not massive, very contoured. It's a very muscled tree, so it's got lots of sort of, you know, it's not round. So I think it'll be worth messing about with, but I also not only want to do some cuttings, but I want to actually make sure that I can do some guaranteed propagation of it. So it'll be layered. I'll do a layer and I'll turn one into two. In fact, I'll probably layer that. This is too small. I'll layer this because it's not the same variety. And then at some stage, once this is off, I'll probably layer that piece there off. But that's a guaranteed way of getting the material. If the layer doesn't take in the first season and it bridges, then I'll cut it again. And I'll layer another one because I'm going to go on and on and on forever. So eventually it'll take root. So it's a way of securing rarer material that you might not be able to get your hands on very often. So that's just a nice passive way of doing it. Once you do cuttings, you've separated the material from the parent plant, and if it doesn't strike, that material is lost. Now with these things here, I would imagine it'll be pretty good. I'm leaning towards that'll be quite good from cutting. But if there's any doubt, then you do the passive way, you do the layering. So, layering, that's the next stage.
Don, can I just stop you quickly? Ask you a question. Just so everyone knows, do you actually do cuttings when it's bare at this time of year?
Yeah, I only do them May at our place, if they're in the ground, forget it, because there's still full leaf on some things out there, because where I am, it's a bit warmer. When I do cuttings, if I do cuttings at this time of the year, find a cool place in your yard, even though it's a cool time of the year, find a cool place in the yard. They don't have to be in any sun, because what you really want them to do, like we'll discuss grafting at some stage, but when you collect material for grafting, you collect the variety that you want to actually put on the understock that you're growing. So you collect it, you put it in wet paper, in a plastic bag, and you stick it in the crisper. Don't make a mistake if you make it a salad. You've got to make sure because I've had some interesting things in my crisper over the years. But what will happen is when you go to, it was a good year, Mother's Day was fabulous, David. That's a marijuana joke, David. I I don't condone drug use, it's terrible. When you go to get the cyan out of the fridge, they callus. They'll have white knobbly bits, and it's usually the precursor to roots. So when it's cool and there's no top growth, they will actually produce this callusing in that there. So with cuttings, when you put them in the ground, the callusing actually, like in your fridge, in wet newspaper, they don't. They produce callusing, but they won't produce roots. Well, I've never had them, and I've done a bit of grafting over the years. Whereas if you take them at this time of the year, you put IVA on, which promotes callusing and root growth. You put them in the mix, everything's right. Everything you need is in the mix, and you will actually produce roots, and the thing will kick away. So that's the reason why you do that. With layering, this time of the year for cuttings, yes, because there's no chance of a false spring that's going to be consistent that make the thing leaf out. Because if it leafs out before it's put roots out, they fail.
Yeah,
they just drop off. They use all their energy into punching out the leaves, and then whatever. So you've got to do it early if you can. So as soon as the leaves are changing, you can take cuttings off that tree at this stage, parietia at that stage, and many other things that deciduous trees that go that colour at this time of the year or even earlier. You can take the material because basically all it's doing is pulling all the nutrients out of the leaves and storing them in the branches and the trunk and the roots. So great time of the year for cuttings. If you put it in a coolish spot somewhere in your yard where it's never allowed to go dry, but you don't want it to be wet, because if it goes wet, it'll just rot. So you know your yard better than I do. I haven't had a chance to get over everyone's fence just yet. I'm working on it. So they'll callus, they'll produce roots, and then as the temperature rises, you'll get leaf out, and then as soon as the leaves are out there, your factory, they'll start punching all the sugars and everything in it. The things will grow like mad. And then at the end of the season, you've got a little tiny, but if you start with a bigger cutting, you end up with this was one of quite a few hundred, so you'll excuse me if it's not the, So.
And air layering time?
Air layering time. It's like there are prime times. If I expect that at this time of the year to cut it off and produce callusing, okay, then why not? Now the reason why, the best time to do those things there is whenever you feel like it. There's a time where you'll get a quicker response. But the problem for me is because of the amount of things I have to do in a week or whatever with the trees, I do layering when the leaves fall off because I can see the piece of material I want or the pieces of material that I want. And so I do it then while I'm not running around like a lunatic with a hose doing 2 or 3 waters a day. So while I've got the time to do that sort of thing, I do the layers then. Now they may have to stay there for 12 months. I don't care. They're there. Now when I do layers, and we will talk about that if you like next. Layering. Now, Evan Marsh. You know Evan Marsh?
Yep.
Evan Marsh, good guy. He's actually a good guy. In spite of all the terrible things I say about him, he's actually a good bloke. Now, where is it? I've left it somewhere. I had a water bottle. No, I had a water bottle. Okay. A couple of years ago I was in Sydney and Evan gave me, they had a 3D printer and they were printing these. Now what they are is, I'll put my glasses on, otherwise I'm flying blind. They are marcotte pots or air layer pots or so. Now you can buy these online. You can buy them in varying sizes. Okay, so they're just a little round pot with a hole through them. Okay, and you use them for doing layers. And then you put the clips back in. You put your rooting medium in them. Have you got some up there?
Yeah.
Okay, so good on you, smarty. You could have said so earlier. So I'm a miserable. So these. Oh, you've got the even bigger ones. See, now I'm not that insecure. Don't. I've got my foot on my own neck here, mate. Which only a man my shape can do that. No, these are fabulous. Yeah. Oh, you've got the ones with the hinges on. Oh, you smarty.
We have a smaller one.
Done well, honey. That's why you get the big bucks. No, done well. So you've got access to it. That's good. Out where I am, I'm actually out in the dark ages. It's still the 1800s where I come from. So what I do is, now I highly recommend I nearly said it. Bastard. Yeah. Yeah, better.
John, we get a refund on them plastic bottles down here, don't we?
Not anymore.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, the most miserable man in Essendon. I'm sleeping with the dogs tonight, he told me. It wouldn't be bad only the dogs don't like me. Okay, so 100 mile an hour tape. You all know what 100 mile an hour tape is. It's that grey stuff you get at service stations when your tarp rips. So cut top, you split them long ways. This is the bit at home where I swear, but I can't swear here. David told me I wasn't allowed to. Can't even say bottom. Sorry Dave, I didn't mean to say that. Okay. No wonder you get a refund. These ones here, it's titanium down there. Hang on.
You're starting to make it look hard, mate.
It is hard. What do you mean starting to? I do 300 of these a day. Shut up, I can imagine,
How about we just buy one of the round balls?
Well, I would highly recommend that, but the problem is out where I come from, if I was to show that to every living member of the town where I come from, they'd go, it looks like a brassiere from somewhere.
Not in Alabama now.
So, like that, on the thing, tape, okay, and I do cut them fairly long because 9 times out of 10 what you're layering is going to be on a funny angle, and you want to actually make sure you cover the area to be layered. But that's just that. The process of layering, this is the thing where people are unsuccessful. You have to, there's a general rule of thumb with layering, and that general rule of thumb is that whatever the diameter of the piece that you want to take off is, if it's 1 inch in diameter, which that isn't, but if it was, you would take 1.5 inches off of cambium. Because if you don't, on vigorous growing things, they'll bridge the gap. They'll heal, you'll end up with callousing, and then you'll have to do it all again. So when you do the process, you want to make sure you're successful the first time, because unless you only find 1 or 2 pieces, most of the time I do quite a few layers around the yard. Each one of the trees in the drums might have half a dozen things on it that need to be layered off because they're good little trees in their own right, and I want to save the material. So when you do the actual thing itself, you and you make sure when you are skinning it, oh, that doesn't matter. People heal. You've got to be careful with a tree. If I was really concerned about taking care of the container that I arrived in, it wouldn't look like it does now.
Don, when you gaffer the tape, gaffer the bottle up,
Yes.
do you gaffer it the whole way round, or do you leave clear bottles so you can see into it?
No. Okay, now that's up there with when you're taking. The biggest killer of cuttings is people going, I wonder if that's struck. And you pull the thing out and it goes, there's a little bit of resistance. You go, that might be just a grain of sand. No, there's a little bit of yeah. So you do, after a while, you stop doing stuff like that. It took me about 15 years.
So you can't
I'm slow on the
cut
up.
the entire thing.
Yeah. So what I do is with the roots, where the roots normally grow, they grow in the soil. How much light is in the soil? Not very much. Some roots, like aerial roots on figs, no drama, they'll grow out in the middle of nowhere, but I generally consider that the roots of most of the deciduous things that I layer, and there was a gentleman in the audience last year that was layering black pine and successfully. So yeah, but I think grow 'em in the dark. I don't have 3 things happening in my yard at any one time, so I don't go out every day and go, geez, I better go and check that. There's 1,000 things happening, and so I just do things and I walk away from them and I leave them, and then in 6 months' time you go, I better go and check that. And that's when you find that that things have either done what they're supposed to or they haven't, you've got to do them again. So with something like that, that goes on, down, you have to open it up again and tape it with it slightly open. I usually put tissue paper in the bottom of them, wrap it around, pack it in so that the water will still transfer through, and then I put, and when I layer, originally when I first started doing air layers, you had to do things in sphagnum moss. The problem, and it works really, really well, it holds the moisture really, really well. The problem with sphagnum moss is that when the thing strikes, when it produces its roots, you take it out of there. You've got to take the sphagnum moss off, and I used to break at least 50 to 60% of the roots off every time I did it. And most layers in that there, when they first start out, there'll be probably 2 or 3 roots. They'll be very, very vigorous, and they'll fill the whole thing, and you think, God, that's got a great load of roots in there. And then you open it up, and they're all connected to 1 or 2 things. You only need to break 1 of those. So I thought, well, I'm going to take it out of that thing, and I'm going to put it into the pot, and it's going to grow in that medium, and it's going to be happy. I wonder if I just put that medium in the thing. And so when they take root, I cut them off, and the first season, even though it doesn't adjust the roots the way they're supposed to, I then plant them straight on into a bigger pot. I separate, I plant them, and then I go in the following season, I take them off, and then I cut off like once you separate the thing, you have to get in underneath and take off that little bit of dead stuff that's sticking out the bottom, the bit of ring bark stuff. But I put them straight into the mix. I have 100% success rate with my layers, not within 3 months. Some layers have to stay on 12 months, but once you do it, they take. So that's the process of that. Layering is the one that I really, really like because you guarantee it. And the other thing is too, while you're layering the plant, you can be shaping the top. If you find an interesting piece of wood, and often we let our bonsai get to a stage where we think, okay, that'd be a nicer tree if it was shorter. I don't think that's the case with this one, but just for argument's point. It'd be really, really nice if this tree was only, down to here. But when you look at what that is up there, there's 3 trees up there that I could easily layer off passively and work my way down into the new apex down here somewhere. And I mean, at the minute I can just go chomp and it's off. And I could even take it as cuttings at this time of the year and I'd be probably reasonably successful because these do actually take root from reasonable sized cuttings. But to guarantee that I'm going to get those with all the ramification there, and if we did layers like that, there'd be 2 or 3 really nicely ramified minis in there. So you don't have to just cut them off and throw them away. So if you've got material at home or trees at home and you think, oh, it'd be nicer to just reduce that a bit, but I'd like to save the bit on the top, you can do that. While you're layering, you can continue to train the top. there's no reason why you have to just, well, if you've got so much material, it doesn't matter. But occasionally you'll find that there's a nice little thing on the top there. I'm going to send it or sell it at the next show or market day or whatever, and I'll spend the money on pots, whatever. But yeah, so it's all about, and again, if it's unusual material you can't just get to any nursery. Like, I don't see too many things like cotoneasters anymore where I am, even though it's a ridiculous thing to say because they used to be everywhere. But you don't see any of any size anywhere. And there was a time where you go into most nurseries and they're sort of fallen from grace for one reason or another. So every now and then I'll see a large one in a garden somewhere, and if I want a piece, I don't. I mean, you can do cuttings, but I go and take layers. They strike really well. So layering's an easy fix, and it's a guaranteed success. So that's a good one to actually practice.
So just going back to the question Shane asked, do you cover that whole lot up, or? What I do with these ones here, when I put the 100 mile nail tape on, the stuff I've got, I use the special grey stuff. Yeah. Because that's what our local survey's got. So I just put the stuff around the whole thing. The whole lot. I actually read a couple of articles years ago where some guy was having great success putting tin foil on things. Mm-hmm. And I thought, well, that sort of repels heat, I suppose. But I suppose if there's heat in there, it also, if you take fish out of the oven you've had dripped in tin foil, it's a much hotter. So I'm thinking, well, where I am, that's not necessary. So I just do like this. I leave the tops open so that when I'm watering there, I can water the top. It goes out, it bypasses the tissue paper, which doesn't break down in 12 months. It holds the stuff in there so you don't lose any of that mix. And if you find that the mix is starting to wear down or walk down a little bit, just top it up a bit. So yeah, that's the clear thing is just because these containers are clear. If they were dark, it'd be even better, I suppose. That's why this was interesting. When they brought them out and they brought these out, I mean, things will strike in these, but I tend to think that once they get to the outer edge, the ultraviolet must have some effect on it. But then again, depends on what you're layering. Because like I said, figs, they'll just come out of the branches mid-air. Yeah.
Don, you mentioned ultimate time, the best time.
Ultimate time. The ultimate time, I think, is probably spring. The beginning of spring, when the upsurge of sap is. If you can interrupt, like, let them get into leaf, and then say, first month of spring, do it then. You've got the whole growing season where that factory, all the leaves are putting all that stuff back down, trying to get it down to the roots, and it can't because you'd come along and scum it, and it'll just help with the calcing. But for me, it's so much more time effective for me to do it in the winter, because if I do it in the spring, for me, spring is, not that it's really, really hot, but it's that hot. I've got a lot of watering to do. And yeah, plus I have a life outside of that as well. I've got 2 Dachshunds.
Oh,
2 decks.
oh my goodness.
Would anybody like 2 Dachshunds?
Yes.
What's this?
Air layering tool.
An air layering tool.
Yeah, cutting tool.
No.
Oh, this is the base. This
Now,
got jaws and
this is
blades.
just showing off.
Here we are, aren't we?
This is just,
We like to do that.
yeah, no, look, it'd probably be best if you actually took this and bung it off back the end of that, mate. That'd be really good. It's made by Canishan, which is I've got Canishan cutters at home, and they're actually quite good. Yeah, they're quite good. I haven't seen that. That's really given me the shits, to be honest. I'm glad you waited until I...
That's why I want to see how long you're going to take with your standing on.
No, they're going to be like cut yourself out.
Just like watering.
You're slow there. So, seeds, cuttings, and it's all straightforward stuff. And look, who here hasn't looked at one of those bonsai focuses or bonsai today? And we've all seen the holes in the tiles and the cuttings through the things and that there. I've done that. That works fantastically. It actually works. They root above the tile. They all fuse. Within 2 seasons, if you leave them, like once they take, you pot them on, you grow them vigorously, and they get these really good, like spreading root systems for minis, all that sort of stuff. And how many people, I mean, I've done that because I was a mad propagator. I don't have a life outside of the yard, so I do that sort of stuff. But most people will have read all this stuff and haven't gone home. How many people have got seedlings in this year, or seed in this year? Well, that's not a bad show of hands, actually. There's a lot of slack mongrels amongst you. But yeah, that's okay. They're obviously the rich ones that can just go out and buy the stuff. I noticed Quentin's hand was down. Anyway, yeah, he's too scared to put his hand up in case they give him the check.
Don, is there a upper limit on how old the material can be for an air layer with textured barks and things like that?
No, because what happens is no matter how textured the bark is, and a really good one for this would be things like the corky bark varieties. Now, I used to grow a lot of cork bark elms and Seiju elms. Now, I used to cut the Seiju elms and I used to pack the material in wet newspaper and send it to Ted, all the top stuff, and he used to strike the cuttings, and he used to strike thousands of them. I had 780 of them in the ground, and some of them ended up with trunks, like, they got to be quite good. The smallest ones stayed reasonably small, like probably a couple of inches, but the biggest ones got to 5-6 inches. I've got one in the backyard, it's got about an 8 or a 10 inch trunk. It's in the ground, it's just a tree. I've just got to say it's a tree. But the bark itself makes them look like they're this, but when you cut into them, when you go to ring bark that tree, now ring barking, layering big stuff, that's a very good question. Like I said, when you're layering something, it's 1.5 times the diameter. So if you're doing something that's an inch thick, you're cutting 1.5 inches of bark off. 1.5 inches of bark off, it's no big deal. What if the tree is this big? Then you've got to skin like 2 feet of it, which is box, because chances are it's got branches down here and branches there that you don't want, but you don't want to cut them off just yet. So what you do is, now I used to have shares in Polaco, but that's not why I'm pushing this point. You do the Polaco shirt box method. Very technical. You say you've got branching down here, and it's this big that you want to actually layer. But you can't actually take 1.5 times the diameter of the bark off. So what I do is, I get a saw, in this case, because I've just got a tiny saw here. Okay, so I get a little saw and I go in the depth of the blade, rough. It can be 1/2 inch, an inch, whatever. I cut all the way around, whatever angle I want. If I want the cutting to come off with roots like that, I'll cut the angle like that. That's okay. So you cut in that diameter. You then go to your Polaco dealer, not that I'm pushing that, and you get the shirt boxes, and they used to have, I don't think Polacos around anymore, but you cut the clear plastic, it's flat plastic. You cut a hole, roughly what you want, and then you split it. So you imagine that it's that, so you cut the hole out, then you split it that way, and then you put half the thing in one, half in the other, and it actually physically blocks the cambium from bridging that gap. And it overlaps, so it can't go where your joint is. So you might have to put 2 lots in. So you might have to put some in from there, there and there. But you block any possibility of that bridging the callousing to actually bridge the wound. It'll then produce roots at that point. Now, you're talking about the thickness of the bark. Doesn't matter how thick that outer bark is, the corky bark is, because the corky bark's basically just dead tissue. The cambium is still alive on the inside, you've just got to go through and get to that point. So on the bigger things, where you are developing bark, I use that method. I go all the way around, I block it off, and then I just put, and I've done layers with pots this size, I put a pot that size, and then you put, and see how they've got holes in them? I then put wire from there to there, and go up around the branch on the thing, and I'll just suspend this in mid-air, up halfway up the tree, if that's what I've got to do. Or I'll cut a hole in the side of the pot, split down to there, and I'll put the thing in. If the branch comes out that I want to take, goes through, so there's a hole on, say, this side, a hole on this side with the branch going through, and then I just tape up the cut above it, fill it with dirt. That's with the plastic separating the layer, and they strike. So you can layer pretty well bigger, smaller. When you get down to small things, it's pointless trying to layer really, really small things because chances are they'll strike. Or unless it's a really rare variety, and then okay, you can do the layering, but it's a lot more fiddly. But yeah, that's the thickness of the bark, is not really a major concern, because no matter how thick the bark is, somewhere in there on a smooth bark thing, the cambium's just under the outer bark, and on a really flaky bark one, I'd still have to cut into the hardwood. So yeah, on larger things that works quite well. And again, in fact, it works guaranteed, because there's no way it can grow across, because they will. I mean, you've only got to see every tree in the neighbourhood. It doesn't matter where you live. There's some guy down the road from you who doesn't like his trees. His missus makes him mow the lawn, and he's got a tree out the front that's got lawnmower disease around it. And they have a heap of callousing down low, and we drive past those trees and look at them and go, oh, that'd be nice. That's all sweet, yeah. So you know, they will bridge across. Even in the open air, they'll bridge across. So yeah, in a controlled environment where you've got stuff around them, they heal and they produce roots and they go really, really well. Now the big mystery one is grafting. Grafting's it's the really hard one, and it's not. Grafting's not hard at all. It's a bit time consuming, but it's not hard. And it just depends on what it is you want to do. Grafting's a good technique if you want to resolve some issues on older trees, or you get a really, really nice trunk. I think I said earlier, I would often find, and I did today on the way up, I came Denny, Echuca, Rochester, Elmore, straight through to Axedale and to Kyneton. And on the sides of the roads there, and I don't know how it's actually happened, because Dave's in that area, and there's actually fruit trees on the side of the road there that don't look like they've been pre-pruned. There's no trenches around them. They're just on the side of the road, so they're still...
chuck the seeds in.
I reckon on the way home tonight he'll go, bugger that, he's told me where the stuff is, I'm going back, he'll be digging tonight. But you're digging up varieties that got big leaves and coarse growth and all the rest of the stuff, but you get trunks. And you get interesting trunks because they're growing in the washways on the sides of the roads. A lot of them are beside the fences and things like that, so they'll even grow in between there. So you see these things and they're just lumps of wood. But if you dig them up, grow them a season, okay, or you can just go to Dave's place and he's already dug them up and he's already grown them a season. But you can get varieties where on their own leaf you think, nah. You go down to one of the local nurseries at this time of year, you buy a crab apple, I think you're going to get them for about 20 to 30 bucks, bare rooted. You pop it into a pot, you grow it on. Next season, after the thing is, after the one you've dug up has got, or the one you got from Dave has got some branching, you then graft onto that. Now I think the most I ever put on one apple at any one time was about 11 or 12 grafts. It was a tree that I'd grown, it was a Granny Smith I dug up on the side of the road. It had a really interesting base. I grew it for a few years. No matter what I did, I couldn't get the leaf size down. I thought, well, it's got some shape, but it's always going to be sort of a rubbishy tree. And I was in Sydney, and I was doing some work there with a guy they got over from England, and we were at Neske's place. And Ray Neske had lots of different types of crab apples, and they were growing. He was striking them, and they were growing on their own roots. So, but he had one called Neske Eye, and it was a yellow flowering variety. Yellow fruiting variety, but it was a real apple shape, because a lot of the crab apples aren't. They look like rose hips. But this one was a real apple shape. And so I bought one of those, and I then grew it on to 12 months, and I took a heap of material off that, stuck it in the crisper, and then when the time came, because in those days everything was calendar, you grafted the first week of this, and you take your cuttings the last week of that. You can graft over a longer period of time with those sorts of things there, but I then grafted all those things on everyone. It was the first time I ever grafted them. Everyone took. And I thought, beginner's luck. No. It just means that even an idiot can do it. So I was able to do it. So used people will have no problem. If you have an interesting piece of material that has got really, really nice characteristics, maybe poor foliage, or it doesn't flower. You know, maybe it's a flowering variety. Because this one that I had, this Granny Smith thing I had, I don't know how old it was on the side of the road. It wasn't 2 or 3 years old. It was an old tree. And the whole time I had it, it never flowered. Well, the year I grafted it, it flowered and fruited. And it still had the tape around it and the scion, and you're not supposed to let them fruit the first season, but it looked fabulous. So I let it go and it didn't matter, it survived. So all the graft, I ended up selling it to Greg Morrison in Canberra. So I don't know whatever happened to it, but it was a nice tree. So, grafting, for changing over the tops. We did some last year. Quentin did it for about the 15th time. He pretended it was the first time he'd ever done that sort of stuff because he didn't want us to know that he already knew all these techniques. But anyway, we grafted some stuff. I was at a place And the gentleman that showed us, is Brian here tonight? He's not here tonight. I was looking forward to rubbish him. Anyway, Brian's a legend. Brian told us everything. Brian is the exact opposite of Quentin. He gets a bit of information, he'll tell you. Quentin will sit on it and he sticks it in the vault and it just doesn't get out anywhere. So we go to Brian's place and we find out about, I wanted to find out what the secret was. So we're banging on about this stuff. I wish I had shares in this stuff because it's the dearest grafting tape. Buddy tape, is it called?
Yeah, buddy tape.
Yeah. It's really, well, the difference between it and grafting tape, because I've got lots of grafting tape at home, this stuff here is very elastic, but it breathes. So even though you're wrapping the stuff up in this stuff here, it still breathes through. So what you do is, what I did was, this was a whip, just a little black pine seedling that had grown as a whip. That's black pine, this is all black pine, but this is one called Coolio. It's one of Coolwin's varieties. And it's quite dense, so it'll make good smaller stuff, good small bonsai. It'll also make good meat and make good large stuff if you want to grow them on big enough. But I'd never grafted it. Now this is the graft I did. The one that Brian did is at home, happy as Larry. The only reason why I bought this was I thought if it falls over in the car and I break the graft off, it's just one I did. But I'm not going to be able to get one that Brian's going to graft again, because I think he said to me as I was leaving, don't come back. So yeah, he's friendly like that.
50 maybe.
Quentin is. But anyway, so it's still got the, can you see the, it's there, yeah, it's still got a cable tie on. So what we did with this, we had to cut the material, take a few of the needles out, we wrapped the whole scion up in the buddy tape, and then we match up the scion to the graft and done. So for tonight's exercise, when you're doing your root pruning of your fruit trees, you save the roots. Now this is a thing called Caloriana. It's the preferred understock that all your pears come in, so your Manchurian pears. I've got one that I bought 100 years ago, and it was grafted onto this stuff. And it had some really ugly roots along the surface of the thing, so when I did the root pruning, I cut the roots off and I looked at them and I thought, oh, sucker, because they're pears, so they did. So that's just a sucker off a root that I cut, and the root was cut just there. It was set there, but it shot from everywhere. This is from Cheru. It's a dwarf Manchurian pear, or so he said. Cheru drinks a bit though, so it might not be that, but I don't care. It's very, very compact. It buds very much like this thing, and there's a bit of stuff on there. And because I've only got the one, and it's got an interesting sort of a base, but because there's only the one, I thought, well, I'll use it as an exercise for grafting. So what I'll do, and I haven't done this before with this stuff here, because I've only got this stuff here. I got it online. I'm not sure if you can get it locally. Can you get this locally?
No, it's probably going to go online.
I got mine online because I'm out where I am, and it's the only way to get anything. There's no nurseries or stuff like that there. So what I will do with this, and this is not the right time of the year to do it, so that's what I'm doing. Because, well, if it's successful, then it just means that the right time of the year is whenever you walk past. Things are going to be dormant. That's just a given. Okay, so where's that? There's that. Okay. So what I'd like to do with that, this will only be a mini. So what I'll do is I'll put a graft into there, and I will because the top's still active, if I put that somewhere warm at home, it'll continue to do whatever. I'll take a piece that's gone to sleep, and we'll see whether or not it takes. So I'll take one off that, and just to do the same thing I did with the pine, the same thing I was shown to do with the pine. He didn't give me the tape measure. This is Quentin's. He said I have to pay by the inch. Him and Ken paid out on me in the yard today. Ken was ruthless. I was really surprised, I was disappointed in you, Ken, if I'm being honest. Okay, so that's, oh, this is the one, the serrations.
That's right.
Now I've got to pay for that 2 inches as well, you miserable git. Honestly.
That bit's not serrated.
You know what I like about you most? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. Okay, so I will wrap this up in what appears to be $87 worth of tape.
What, the whole lot?
No, just that bit. I told you it was charging by the inch. Okay, so just...
Does that hold the moisture in the...
Yeah, it appeared, look, with the pines, when we did the pines, which I think they were probably the hardest in the sense that you've got to wait a lot longer with the pines, because even in spring, when most things bud out in spring and push on, pines sort of, that first bit of the candling or whatever is, it takes a little bit of time. But you leave it on, and then what happens is it grows through the tape. The tape actually swelled right up, and then the needles poke through like all these little green, literally needles sticking through the thing. And eventually, because you know that you don't pull on the cuttings, I'm out there going, oh, that needle wants to be free. And the resistance to just cut the stuff was just, I mean, I won't cut this stuff for what I'm paying for it, so yeah, this will be on for about 4 years, this stuff. I'll reuse it.
It's the Jeff Banner method. He used to reuse raffia.
You leave Jeff alone. Jeff was my mate. So, I'm just wrapping that up. Okay, I would imagine that it will do the same thing. There'll be bud swell and all the rest of it. Okay, so that was 1 inch. No. I cut that close to the serration. That wasn't a full piece that I cut before. That big over. Yeah, that big. Okay. I owe you 3 segments. Okay. So, the most important thing with any grafting is to line up at least one side of the graft. When you're doing deciduous things, because there's plenty of, you can see this stuff okay, I generally look at the piece that I'm going to actually put on to it, and I find a spot where I know that I can line up at least both sides if I can, because you get a better union. Like you end up with a transition from the understock into the new piece. It's a lot more seamless, you know, in a couple of seasons. So I will. I want to put it into there. Now, on about a 45 to the material itself, you then make a cut. You then make 2 cuts, one slightly longer than the other, because one on the inside of this cut, the one on the wood here, it'll be longer. On the outside, not as long. You then now on one side, and I'm not bragging, that's perfect. Hang on. So, oh, hang on.
It does look good.
Now, there's one other thing you've got to do, which I can't show you tonight because I didn't bring that stuff either. Just before I left home today, I had 2 lots of this sitting beside the jug. I had the grey paste that you put on as well. And then my sister rang, she works at one of the service stations over in the south of town. She said, I've got you a nice latte here for when you come through. So I didn't make a cuppa, so I walked straight past the stuff, otherwise I would not be into this one for about $80 so far, so yeah. So then, you then wrap, and I'll wrap from the bottom up. And then when you wrap from the bottom up, the other thing about this stuff here is it's sort of self-adhesive. It sticks, which is...
Self-amalgamating? That like electrical tape that you...
No, but it's not sticky like that, but when you stretch it out, it does tend to stick. It's almost, it's like a Velcro effect, but it's not. But it's really good like that. Now, that's open at the top. $90. Take that away from me before I have to sell my house. Okay. Because this isn't just for effect, I want this to take. And that way it's a bit like, most of the things I do demos on, you want them to survive. But you also, 9 times out, I've got that many pieces of demo material at home in the yard that I've done demos, like in Sydney or where, and then nobody ever sees it again, because I don't usually get too many invites back. Thanks, Dave, you're a legend. But yeah, now I don't know why. I've got an idea. So, now that should weatherproof it a little bit. Now, I'll leave the top. Now, I can't see any reason why that won't take, because it all depends on where I put this when I get home. I'll put it in a warm area. That way I'll keep the roots actually still active. This was asleep, at least the piece off it, because I didn't knock the leaves off. They went sort of all different sorts of colours and fell off. There's a few still holding on. But I'll put it somewhere where the base stays warm, but the top will be, so it'll be somewhere in the, on a piece of concrete somewhere or whatever, where they get a bit of general heat in the day. And I'll be surprised if it doesn't take.
No need to use mastic or anything like that on this?
Yes. Now that's what I should have brought. But you were asleep through that bit when I just said that a few minutes ago. So, but that's okay, because I understand you're getting on them. Happens to all of us, mate. Yeah, no, the mastic stuff's ideal, and it absolutely waterproofs the thing, and then there's no chance. And the other thing is too that the mastic is once it sets, it gives a bit of rigidity to it as well. So yeah, because what I do with this sort of stuff here, or what I used to do with this sort of stuff here, I used to graft mainly dwarf maples onto polymorphing, just the standard Japanese maple. So even though this tape's really good stuff. Oh, yeah, no, you've got to use it in conjunction with the other stuff, but I just didn't bring it. I wasn't going to ask him, can I borrow some mastic? Can you imagine? I have to sell a kidney to pay for that. Yeah. Jesus. Yeah, no. He smiles and I can give you a hand with that tree, but don't you trust him. It's just bad news, that bloke. Anyway, so...
The mastic or the gorilla?
Sorry?
The harder mastic stuff or the gorilla stuff? Which do you use?
Was it gorilla snot or whatever? Yeah, but it is. It comes out like that keonal paste. You can get it like that. You can get them in tubs and you can apply it with a spatula or whatever. Yeah, they all work okay. Any of the stuff that will waterproof the thing. And the other thing is too, that it's a terrible colour. You get it on the branch, people go, oh yeah, but it stains. So it doesn't, this is going to be a tree in 5 years. If it takes, that will actually be quite presentable in 5 years. So you do one of these, you sit around and you don't do anything for 5 years, you just wait for it to happen. You do 100 of them. You do 200 of them, and then you grow some seedlings and you play with that, and before you know it, 4 or 5 years ago, before you know it, 20 years has gone by, and you're looking at one of about 20 left from probably about 2,000. And I know not everyone's going to fill their yard up like I did, because most people are smart, but a lot of the stuff that you start, even the stuff that you just bring in, I propagated a whole heap of stuff. I'll bring it into the club. It'll be sitting on the thing there. This time of the year, like during one of your workshop things, divide up a heap of ashes and hand them out. Somebody will want them, or beginners. Stuff where it's not going to be a financial burden on the person to buy the things and then risk killing them because they're only novices. this is a really cheap, and you don't need to be anything clever to fill a tray full of dirt and throw a handful of seed on it, cover it up and give it a drink every now and then. Most of the stuff, well, like I said, this came up on its own in the pot. I didn't sow it because I've got it was sitting underneath one of the bigger ones. But yeah, if you deliberately propagate stuff, your chance of success and your strike rates are much greater. By chance, I mean, I have things strike on the ground that I don't rake up, or you rake up and it gets covered in dirt on the end of it. And they might not be really desirable varieties of things, but you go, that thing has actually got chopped off that tree. I remember pruning that tree 3 months ago, and there's a stick on the ground, it's got leaves on it. You go, oh bloody hell, that thing survived all on its own. So, and you give things like that a bit of a go because they've put in such effort just to survive. So yeah, so when you're doing this sort of stuff, grow lots of things in mass. If you're really worried about painting yourself into if you're really worried about having to cut the clothesline off, then you just bring them into the club and you give them, and eventually Quentin will have all of that stuff. So, any questions? Well, my main push tonight is it is absolutely the right time. This time last year when we went and did the grafting, I was told it's within the first 2 weeks of August was ideal for where we were doing the grafting, and it was. But where I went to, I was blindfolded for most of it in the back of the van. Quentin doesn't want you to know where it was, but it was down a really. But anyway, we got there. But when I got home, the level of development that my plants were budding at was different than where we were. So all these things are site specific. So I'm going to try grafting the pines. I've got a heap of pines to graft this year because I've got a heap of that size. I've got a heap of them. And they're all just black pine, which there's nothing wrong with black pine. But I also went up to Coolwins and I went to Confer Garden and grabbed a few different varieties of things last year. This time last year I got some Emery's Dwarf, I got some Coolio, I got a small, I'm at that age where I forget shit all the time. It's some Nagasaki thing or whatever it is, but it is an unusual dwarf. It doesn't cluster like the Macawas and things like that, so I think it'll be good for doing minis. So I'm going to graft, I just grew those on for 12 months so I can get plenty of Siamwood. I'm going to graft a whole heap, but I'm going to start in probably first week or two of July, and I'll graft all the way through. Now these were grafted here in Melbourne on this, I think it was the 5th or the 6th of August I was down. These were, and I only did 2. I lied, I did 1, and which Brian supervised, and Brian did 1, and they both did. So on the first go, and I haven't grafted any of this sort of stuff here in 10, 15 years because I just don't do much of that stuff anymore. But, so I'm going to graft a whole heap of stuff because in my climate I know the difference between what it was here at the beginning of August and what it is at my place. So I'm going to graft a whole heap. I reckon I've got a good 3 weeks of grafting where I am if I go for the traditional grafting times. My point to this is you are in a great take hardwood cuttings time. Now's the time. And the other thing is too, anything that you've got in your yard where you think to yourself, like, if I only wanted 1 or 2 pieces off this, even at this stage, on Pariah, which I know a little bit about this stuff, I would take cuttings of that up to 1/2 inch, 3/4 inch, and be quite comfortable in knowing that they will strike. And that will be in, when I used to strike them back in the years when I would make lots of them, it was 30% peat, about 60% sharp sand, which I used to get from Bunnings in the yellow whatever, and there was 10% perlite. That was the mix. I read it somewhere, it was like the end all of stuff. Now I do things in pot mix and they strike okay. But, so at this time of the year, if you're going through your trees and they're dropping their leaves, anything that's got a branch on it where you think, you know that especially deciduous things, give it a try. If it's going to make the original tree better for its removal, at this time of the year, the chances are it will strike quite readily. Now, if you go home and cut any branches off your trees and they don't strike,
It's your fault.
it's Quentin's fault.
John, just a question, particularly with pines, matching species to the site.
Well done, well done. That's a loaded question. This time last year when I came and did the thing, Quentin had said a couple of years ago, and this is, I know I take a lot of the piss out of him, but the bottom line is, he was talking about a bloke who was grafting white pine down here, and he had some really interesting trees. So we talked about it. So I said to him, I'd really, really like an introduction. He went, he hung up. I chased him for 2 seasons, and I did, and mentioned it a couple of times. It's very hard to line up this other guy. You know, he only comes out on the full moon. You've got to be in the right place. Your car's got to be the right colour orange, all this sort of stuff. We went there last year. Now, don't, you can shake your head that it's true. I liaised with Steve Jarrell. Now, I work down the peninsula every year, and I stay at Steve's place, in the garage usually, yeah, with a cat. Anyway, he had a really, really nice, it's a pine. Maritime pine. The trunk is spectacular. Really, really nice. It really, really annoyed Quentin that Steve was thinking about changing the top over because it meant he couldn't buy the tree and then change the top over. So we discussed whether or not maritime and black will do the thing. Well, back when there was the embargo on black pine seed, when you couldn't get black pine seed in from overseas because of some virusing that's getting around, the only way you could get the stuff was to collect the seed locally. So of course, you know, blokes like Cool and that they've got all the seed. They then, when they run out of black pine seed, grafting the different types of black pine onto black pine seedlings, they then started using radiata. So they were grafting black pine onto radiata, and it goes quite well. It's a limited lifespan because radiata doesn't live as long as black pine, but it means it'll only live to about 150 years. So I don't want to do that because I want to see my trees, you know, I plan on being around for a little bit longer. So Steve said, well, the foliage on this pine of his was really cool and ordinary. It's really, you can't get over the trunk. The trunk is spectacular. Mile deep bark, it's got all the bells and whistles except the foliage is terrible. So we're going to try this thing here, we'll try and do the graft. So I never did any of the grafts on that, which annoyed me, but there were 3 guys doing the graft on there, so I went and played in the corner. They treat me like I'm disabled or something, so I went and played in the corner, they grafted the things, and the attrition rate was quite high. Not many of the grafts took. But some of them did, which means that they... Well, 2 needle pines, 5 needle pine onto 2 needle pine. So, black pine, 2 needle pine. You can put white pine on, 5 needle pine. So, they go over that way. So, thinking like that, you think, well, they're compatible, why not the other way? If we lived in a place where white pine would grow on the side of the road, and you couldn't get black pine anywhere, you would graft the black pine onto the white. So they do, well, that particular, the maritime, it did actually, one of the grafts was taken and it is still growing. As far as I know, I'll be there on the, I think I'm in Mornington on the 17th, 16th, 17th. So I'll be down, I've got to come and heckle that bloke on the 16th, so yeah, I'll come and heckle Dave. But yeah, I'm going to go and have a look at that, and I'll probably going to go up the hill and look at some other stuff. But they will graft over. So if you go anywhere where there's regenerated seedlings, so you're in the forest somewhere where some of the radiatas are, I mean, I see some stuff down near, what's the name of the place where going down the Calder Road, the Calder Highway, on the left-hand side, there's a lot of the pine forest there. They logged a lot of it a few years ago and there's lots of regrowth there, but there's some interesting stuff growing in there. Don't pretend you don't know, David. It's not all you're digging around. Some other people go there too.
That's where that lady got those mushrooms.
I got a recipe. Coming for dinner.
Allegedly.
Oh, so there's a lawyer in the place. Yeah. But I often see radiata regrowth on the sides of roads. If I go in through Currajong, Bilpin, if I'm going to Sydney, like up through the back way, from Cowra on there's radiata growing and you see seedlings on the sides of the roads and you think, oh, they're just radiata. And radiata's a bugger of a thing to handle, to get there are techniques that you can use with radiata to get the foliage right and get all the budding right in that there, but there's only about half a dozen people really know how to do that, and none of you will say. Isn't that right? Isn't that right?
No one.
Yeah, you should sit very quietly. You've got nice radiata and you go, how do you do that? Oh, I'm a bit busy. So, anyway, but changing the tops over. If you've got existing, so grafting is good for that sort of thing with the conifers. So as far as matching black to black, white to white, red to whatever, you can graft onto red. It's a 2 needle anyway, so you can graft onto those. So yeah, there's no reason why you can't do that sort of thing. So it's just about at the right time, and I think down here pretty well, unless you're right up in the hills, there'd be a blanket statement. I think in Melbourne you could graft here successfully, unless you're getting really heavy frosts on your stock, which I don't think that'd be the case, from probably mid-July through to early to almost mid-August, depending on how advanced you have the scion wood. So if you've got a tree you want to actually graft the pieces off that onto another one, I'd put that in the shade somewhere, in a cooler spot, keep it a bit more dormant for a little bit longer, move the other stuff out into the warm so that you've got it up and going, and then bang, bang, done. So, yeah.
Is that same philosophy of rootstock and scion would apply to maples? I presume it would.
I've grafted literally thousands of Japanese maples, and a lot of the Kyoheims and a lot of the really dwarf forms. One of my favourites was one called Canara Pygmy, and it was a great little maple, and it really, there's no buds on that compared to that. They really are clusters.
So you have to graft other types of maples onto Japanese maple only?
No, well, you graft a guy by the name of Arnold Tees, your minor rare plants. Him and JD Vertrees in Colorado. Now, JD Vertrees was the maple guru. They swapped material from the Northern Hemisphere to the Southern Hemisphere. They used to swap material so that they could graft in off seasons. I can get dormant season from the Northern Hemisphere when it's active here, and they can get active, whatever, in the dormant season there. So they used to swap over stuff. For years and years and years, they tried to graft this dwarf trident maple, and they had no success. It would grow quite well on its own roots, but they wanted to graft it. So they tried, and in the end they discovered it was Premna japonica. And these were the two. They were the gods when it came to Japanese maples. And it was not even the maple, it wasn't even the maple. So the thing is, with Japanese maples, you use polymorphum seed, which is your standard Japanese maple. It's Acer palmatum polymorphum. And you graft, I graft onto Senkaki, which is the coral bark, because I've got a Senkaki at home and it actually produces red seedlings. You graft them, most of them do. So yeah, if you see a red stem maple somewhere, grab the seed. Chances are 99% of the time you'll get a red stem maple. But yeah, you grow so many. Now my Japanese maples, I've got maples at home, there's hardly any in there compared to the maples. They grow really thick. And whenever I want to do anything with the maples, that's how I used to grow them. I still grow maples, but I grow them on their own roots, and I grow them as little seedlings now, and I put them out like that. But the reason why I still do that is it's left over from the old days when I used to have to push all the material out, and I used to have I had about 5 different varieties of mini maples I used to sell in punts. Ted used to buy a lot of them, and he never used to give me very much money for them. But I shouldn't speak ill of Ted because he was a good bloke to me in other ways.
So can you do all this sort of grafting too onto tridents, for instance?
You can grow the different types of tridents on. There's a few different types of.
I'm thinking of I've got a really good dissected maple growing in the gut, and I want to take some.
I don't know that any of your polymorphum varieties or offshoots. So all your Japanese varieties of maples come from Japan, and they're your momiji, and then your kaiids are from China. So they're the trident maples. I don't know that they will cross. I can't say they won't, but I don't know that. But see, Japanese maples are just weeds. Like I rake them up at my place and put all the leaves as they fall off on the thing, and then I go through in spring and I pick out whatever I want if they come up on the ground, because they do. Most of the time I don't bother; they get sprayed because they're just the seeds everywhere. But they're such an easy thing to grow. If you see any Japanese maples around the place in the next couple of weeks, grab the seed, put it in. By mid-spring you'll have seedlings. In one season they'll be graftable. Like they'll be big enough to, if you push them on a bit. Doing your tridents on anything other than 3-lobed or any of the Chinese varieties, I don't know how many there are, but there'd be quite a few different types of trident maples. I'd stick to that. But I wouldn't say don't do it, but I wouldn't put your best pieces of scion into them just in case. Yeah, but no. So yeah, so cuttings now in another month another month and a week, another 5 weeks, grafting. So you've got some time to find some scion. And any time you see something that you'd like to graft onto something, you think, I get a really nice piece of material here, damp newspaper, in a plastic bag, in the crisper. It'll hold for 2 or 3 months. I used to graft all the way through to October and sometimes into November. But the scion runs away pretty quickly because the sap flow is really, really quite vigorous at that stage. So yeah, it's just a way of filling up the yard a bit quicker than you really need to. Yeah. So, any other questions?
With that, you would just hold the claim just then. Once all that took root, would you be chopping the top off?
Yeah, now, different with pines than these. I used to find that once the scion on any of the deciduous things, once they leafed out and were actively growing, and because most of the stuff I was doing, apart from the maples, were fruiting varieties, they would pop, and you were always taking flower wood, you know, because that's just what's on the tips of things. So you take the flower, you put on, they pop into flowers. Once the flowers are basically finished, you'd nip them off. I'd try not to leave the fruit on. But once they start to actually grow, once the leaf would come out, you knew that they were actually going. You can pare these back quite quickly. With this has been cut 3 times. Yeah, I cut the main one off. It was up about there because they grow up and then they cartwheel, and they grow up and they cartwheel. Yes, so I took the top cartwheel off, then I took that off, and then I cut the next one down. This will go in spring. I'll take the whole lot off because there's actually more foliage on the scion now than there is on the other. But yeah, with conifers, Brian said, not Quentin, Brian said pare them back slowly. Quentin said no, you can cut that off as soon as you get home because he didn't want me to succeed. But Brian's a good bloke. So he said, no, just take it back. Just take it back like every 3 or 4 months, depending on what. In the event that it took, I think is what he said. And it did take, so yeah. So I just reduced that, and I mean, yeah, I'm pretty sure with the amount of foliage that's on that bit there now compared to what's up the top, yeah, we're pretty well take that off. And this season I'll just work on paring up the worm down the bottom, and I'll pot it into a bigger container, and I'll feed hell out of it, and it'll really grow. So yeah, deciduous things you can come back there. Once they're really, really active, yes.
Would you take that as
this one here off? I'd probably take it off in a couple of goes.
Layer it or anything?
No. This is just the pear rootstock off the. So I'll have to root prune that other. I'll pear at some stage. It's in a fairly big tub, so I'll get more of the stuff I want to do it. I don't know why I even bothered because I need more of these. Like I need more elbows. But you just do what you do because you've got the material. But yeah, you can cut these back much more vigorously. Tony.
What's the most complex answer you've ever given to a simple question?
I think it goes back to about 97. I was in Mudgee.
I'm sorry, I'm deaf. I can't hear.
I'll turn it up for you. I hope your arm's not sore. I'll meet you in the car park, mate.
Okay, I think that's it. Any other questions? All right, everyone, thanks Don DeLuca. That was great. Thanks, Don.
Thank you, Tony.
Well, you had to do the last word, didn't you? That was really good. Don, I learned a few things there. I was surprised. Like cuttings at any time, really, and cuttings at this time is really good. I didn't even know that. So there you go. Raffle tickets, guys. Buy some raffle tickets. I think there's still some maybe coffee and tea left. And I think that's it. We'll see you next month for you, Grant. All right? Actually, I'll see you on Moodgate. So make sure you email me if you want to join us on the Moodgate nursery tour. Okay? All right. So look out for my emails. Lots of emails coming in. Tony.